The Montreal Canadiens are done. Their season is over. They no longer have a shot at the COVID Cup. What went wrong this season? What went right? Let's look at some of the issues they can fix during this offseason, and let's dive into episode 13 of Cook's Corner. Okay, so here's the thing. The first thing we have to talk about is Carey Price. He is still Carey Price, and the biggest reason why is Carey Price got some rest. He got some time off because of COVID and got to rest up before the Stanley Cup playoffs, and it showed with his play. He was fantastic against the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Philadelphia Flyers. So what does that mean for the Montreal Canadiens? It means they need to get Carey Price a reliable backup goaltender before Cayden Primeau is ready to take the reins on as the full-time backup in Montreal. I don't think he's quite there yet, so Montreal, you got to go goalie hunting this offseason and get a guy that can play behind Price at least 25 to 30 games so we can have rest and be ready for the postseason, because we see that Price still has that extra gear once the games start to matter. Let's talk about the good before we get to the bad stuff with this Montreal team. Nick Suzuki, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, they both emerged during the postseason. We saw Nick Suzuki have strides during the regular season. He was fantastic, especially in the back 40 games for this club. But there were concerns about Jesperi Kotkaniemi and what he could contribute to this team moving forward. He had a stint in Laval where it was very impressive, but people wanted to see it at the NHL level, and boy did he show it during this postseason run for the Habs. He was probably their best forward, maybe behind Suzuki. I'd say probably Suzuki had that little bit of an edge, but both were fantastic in the postseason, and it's very clear that the future down the middle of the ice for Montreal is very, very bright. Let's be honest, that's something we haven't been able to say for a long time with the Montreal Canadiens, but now you have Nick Suzuki, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Philip Deneau, and Jake Evans as your four centers, and I'd say that's a pretty damn good start. Jonathan Drouin got a lot of flack this season, and rightfully so, but he did start the season red hot, and that was the Drouin we thought we were going to see for the rest of the year, but an injury sidetracked him, and he wasn't the same player once he returned to the ice. Then when the postseason started, we saw kind of a roller coaster from Drouin. You could see spurts from him when he was confident, and when he's confident, he's a completely different player. But at the end of the day, Drouin and Suzuki were in on 11 of Montreal's 13 goals against Philadelphia, and I'd say that's a pretty good start for a guy you're only playing in the $5 to $6 million range. Now that the season's over, we know Montreal will be selecting 16th overall, and this is a very deep draft for wingers, and also coincides with their biggest need as a franchise, and that is a scoring winger. Now we know Montreal has Cole Caulfield waiting in the wings as one of the best goal scoring prospects in recent memory, but they really need someone on their roster now that can contribute, so it wouldn't surprise me if Montreal goes hard after Taylor Hall as a UFA or other scoring wingers in the trade market, whoever that may be. I really wonder about Max Domi's future in Montreal. I could see him being dealt to deal with some of the issues on the back end. I always have thought for the longest time that would be a great fit with Minnesota, and a trade for a guy like Jonas Brodin on their back end. I think the trade would work out perfectly for both sides. Minnesota needs offense, especially down the middle of the ice, and Domi could certainly do that for them, while Brodin could play on that top pairing with Shea Weber and give Montreal more depth on the back end and a puck mover, which is certainly something they have been lacking in the recent years. The one thing that's been a constant struggle for this team over the past 2 years is their power play, and Kirk Muller just straight up hasn't been able to find a solution for it. I thought Kirk Muller did an admirable job replacing Claude Julien behind the bench for most of the Philadelphia series, but the reality is he's been in charge of the power play, and he just hasn't been able to find a solution for this team, and they can't seem to get out of the bottom third in the league in that category. For whatever reason, this team just cannot gain the zone on the power play. They have difficulty entering the zone. Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Nick Suzuki should help some of that, but there certainly needs to be adjustments on the power play, because this team just cannot be in the bottom third in the league in that category. Let's wrap this up with a few suggestions for the offseason for Marc Bergevin and the Montreal Canadiens. Number one, they need a scoring winger. They need one badly. Number two, they need a top pairing defenseman that can skate, that can play with Shea Weber and move the puck well. I think they might find one in unrestricted free agency, and it could be a guy in Boston that Montreal fans don't exactly love by the name of Torrey Krug, but who knows if he'd want to come to Montreal and play with this team after being with Boston for all of his career so far. Number three, they need a backup goaltender, one that can play 30 games at least behind Carey Price. We've seen what he can do when he's healthy and what he did during this postseason. They need to get that checked off on their agenda, and they need to do that early on in free agency. And the last thing they need to do, they need to fix the power play, and they need to do it now. I don't know if that's another coach coming in during this offseason or some issues on the personnel, but they need to fix the power play. I don't know what the future holds in Montreal for Max Domi and Tomas Tatar, two players that were expected to be key contributors during this postseason run for Montreal, and they were very much a disappointment. Could they both be moved this offseason? It is very possible, but we'll see what Marc Bergevin decides on that front. That's it for me on this episode of Cook's Corner. Comment below what you'd like to see the Montreal Canadiens do during this offseason. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.